Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We love to tackle the big questions here, and today we're going really big.
Huge.
Like really, really big. We're diving into the nature of human existence.
Oh, wow. Where do we come from? Who are we? That kind of thing.
Exactly. And this deep dive was actually inspired by you, our listeners. We got so many requests to explore, the bigger picture, to look beyond, the everyday explanations for things.
Right. People want to know the deeper truth.
Yes. And so to help us on this journey, we're turning to Gregg Braden and his book, The Science of Self-Empowerment.
Oh, Gregg Braden. He's always pushing the boundaries.
He really is. And in this book, he really challenges some of those conventional views on human evolution.
Yeah, he's not afraid to question the accepted narratives.
No, he isn't. He suggests that there might be, a more intentional and interconnected story to our origins.
Intentional, so not just random chance.
Exactly. And he delves into some really fascinating ideas about the power of belief and the wisdom of the heart.
The heart, not just the brain.
Right. He sees the heart as a crucial aspect of understanding ourselves and our potential.
I'm intrigued already.
Me too. So today, our mission, you could say, is to really unpack some of the key insights from the science of self-empowerment.
Okay, sounds good.
We want to, kind of pull out those ideas that might offer you a fresh perspective, new ways of looking at those big questions of who we are and where we came from.
A new origin story.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully what we uncover today will prompt you to maybe reconsider some of your own assumptions about your own potential and your place in the world.
I like it. Let's shake things up.
Exactly. Okay, so Braden starts us by pointing out something really interesting, something almost paradoxical. He says, despite all of our technological advancements, science still can't definitively answer that fundamental question of how we came to exist.
Oh, I see. So we've mapped the human genome, we can send people into space, but we still don't really know where we came from.
It's kind of wild, right?
Yeah, it is.
And he argues that this uncertainty, it actually has a real impact on how we see ourselves.
Like how so?
Well, he uses the example of healing. Like if we don't fully understand the nature of our being, it can actually influence how we approach healing.
That makes sense. If you don't understand how something works, it's harder to fix it.
Precisely. And so he suggests that we need a new story, a more complete understanding.
Well, a new story. I like that. But what's wrong with the old story? Darwin's theory of evolution.
Well, Darwin's theory is over 150 years old, and while it was groundbreaking at the time, Braden argues that new discoveries in various scientific fields necessitate a reevaluation of our origin story.
Okay, so not throwing Darwin out completely, but maybe adding some new chapters.
Exactly. And this is where it's important to be really clear about what this book is and what it isn't. The Science of Self-Empowerment. It's not a standard science textbook.
Right. It's not a biology 101 lecture.
No, and it's not a religious text either.
So not trying to prove any particular creation myth.
Nope. It's really its own thing. Braden is attempting to bridge the gap between science and spirituality.
Ah, I see. So he's looking at the hard scientific evidence, but also considering other ways of knowing.
Yes. And he uses peer-reviewed scientific evidence from various fields, but he focuses specifically on the period after our species appeared on Earth.
Okay, so not how life arose, but what happened once humans were already here.
Right. And because of this approach, some of the conclusions he reaches, they might differ from both traditional scientific and religious narratives.
That's bound to ruffle some feathers.
It definitely does. But he's not afraid of controversy. And to illustrate his point, he starts the book with a really personal story.
Oh, a story. I love a good story.
Well, this one is pretty amazing. He talks about this experience he had at the Mayo Clinic.
The Mayo Clinic. So a reputable place.
Very reputable. So he had this anomalous growth in his bladder.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
It wasn't. But the crazy thing is, it inexplicably disappeared right before a scheduled biopsy.
Wait, what? So he went in for surgery and there was nothing there?
Yeah, the surgeon was baffled. He woke Braden up from anesthesia and said there was nothing to remove.
Wow. That's incredible.
And what makes it even crazier is there was a photograph taken just moments before showing the growth clear as day.
So it just vanished.
Vanished. And Braden uses this experience as an example of the body's potential for unexpected healing.
So he's suggesting that our beliefs and our perspective can have a real impact on our physical health.
Exactly. And he goes on to explore this connection between mind and body throughout the book.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
And to further build his case, he points to something really interesting. He says that across many different ancient traditions, there's this recurring theme of humankind originating from intentional acts by advanced beings.
Intentional acts, like we were created by some kind of higher intelligence.
That's the idea. He looks at texts like the Mayan Popol Vuh and the Judeo-Christian texts.
Right, those creation stories.
And he points out that they all share this common thread.
So he's saying this ancient wisdom might be more than just myth.
Exactly. And this leads him to another key point, the power of belief. He argues that the stories we tell ourselves, the things we believe, they have a huge impact on our lives.
Oh, I totally believe that. Our beliefs shape our reality.
And he uses the example of smoking to illustrate his point.
Smoking, like cigarettes.
Yeah. For decades, smoking was widely accepted as harmless, even healthy.
Well, all those doctors recommending a certain brand? Crazy.
It's wild. And it wasn't until the scientific evidence became overwhelming that public perception shifted.
So it took hard evidence to change people's beliefs.
And even then, it was a slow process.
Okay, so what does this have to do with evolution?
Well, Braden is suggesting that maybe we're clinging to an outdated story, even though emerging evidence might be pointing us in a different direction.
So he's not saying evolution is wrong, but maybe incomplete.
Right, and he thinks this adherence to the old story might be holding us back.
Interesting. So how do we update this story? Where do we start?
Well, first he acknowledges that Darwin himself even recognized some of the limitations of his own theory.
Oh, really? He wasn't completely convinced himself.
Well, in his book On the Origin of Species, Darwin actually pointed out that there was a lack of fossil evidence for transitional forms.
Ah, the missing links.
Right. And he admitted that this could be due to gaps in the geological record or even flaws in his own observations.
So he was open to the possibility that his theory wasn't the whole story.
Exactly. And Braden suggests that we need to have that same openness today.
Okay, I'm with you. So what are some of these new discoveries that challenge the traditional evolutionary narrative?
Well, one example is the analysis of mitochondrial DNA from a Neanderthal infant.
Mitochondrial DNA. Remind me what that is again.
It's DNA that's passed down only through the mother, so it's great for tracing ancestry.
Right. I remember now. So what did they find?
Well, they found that Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA is significantly different from modern human mitochondrial DNA.
So we're not as closely related to Neanderthals as we thought?
That's what the evidence suggests.
That's pretty huge. I mean, that really throws a wrench in the whole family tree, doesn't it?
It does, and yet it hasn't really been widely discussed.
Interesting. So if we're not descended from Neanderthals, then where do we come from?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay, so what else? What other evidence does he present?
Well, he talks about the remarkable anatomical stability of modern humans.
Anatomical stability, meaning we haven't changed much physically.
Right. Over the last 200,000 years, there's been very little change in our basic anatomy.
Even though we've developed all this technology and culture.
Exactly. And genetic studies have confirmed this. There was a 2008 study that found a 28,000-year-old Cro-Magnon individual from Italy was genetically very similar to modern Europeans.
So we basically popped up fully formed.
Pretty much. And that raises some questions about the whole gradual evolution thing.
Right, because if evolution is all about adapting to survive, then why didn't we keep evolving?
Good question.
Okay, so we've got the Neanderthal DNA thing and the anatomical stability thing. What else?
Well, he also delves into the whole DNA similarity thing. You know how we share so much of our DNA with other species?
Right, like 98% with chimps. It's crazy to think about.
It is. And so he asks, if our genes are so similar, why are we so different?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What makes us human if it's not just our genes?
And he suggests that the answer lies in how those genes are expressed.
Expressed, meaning they're turned on and off.
Exactly. And he uses the example of the FOXP2 gene.
What's that one do?
It's linked to complex speech, and it's expressed very differently in humans than in other species.
Ah, so it's not just about having the gene, it's about how you use it.
Precisely. And then he brings up the concept of irreducible complexity.
Irreducible complexity. What's that?
It's the idea that some biological systems are so complex, so interdependent, that they couldn't have evolved gradually.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about the blood clotting process. It involves about 20 different proteins all working together in a specific sequence.
Right, and if one of those proteins is missing, the blood doesn't clot.
Exactly. And Braden argues that this kind of system couldn't have arisen through small incremental changes.
Because it wouldn't work until all the parts were there.
Right. It's like trying to build a car engine one piece at a time. It won't run until all the pieces are in place and working together.
Okay, I see what you mean.
And then he talks about human chromosome 2.
Chromosome 2. What's special about that one?
Well, it appears to be the result of a fusion of 2 ancestral chromosomes.
A fusion. So 2 chromosomes became 1.
Yep. And the way it happened, it suggests a sudden event rather than a gradual process.
So not typical evolution.
Right. And science can't really explain why or how this fusion occurred.
Okay, so lots of questions about our genetic origins.
Lots of questions. And now he takes us into a whole other realm, the intelligence of the heart.
The heart, not just the brain.
Right. He says we've been so focused on the brain as the seat of consciousness that we've overlooked the heart's role.
So he's saying the heart is more than just a pump.
Much more. He presents evidence that the heart has its own complex neural network.
A mini brain.
Yes, exactly. And this network allows the heart to process information, feel emotions, and even remember independently of the brain.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So our heart has its own intelligence.
That's what he's suggesting. And he points to the many references to the heart in ancient texts as further evidence.
Like the Bible.
The Bible, ancient Egyptian texts, indigenous traditions from around the world.
So this idea of the heart's wisdom, it's been around for a long time.
It has. And he shares a really fascinating story about heart transplant.
Oh, this should be good.
It's about an 8-year-old girl who received a heart transplant from a 10-year-old boy who had been murdered.
Oh, wow.
And after the transplant, the girl started having vivid nightmares about the boy's murder.
No way. She was dreaming about the donor's death.
Yeah, and she was able to give specific details about the murder that the police were able to verify.
So she somehow received memories from the donor's heart.
It seems that way. And this challenges our whole understanding of memory and consciousness.
Definitely. It's like the heart carries its own memories.
And this leads Braden to suggest that maybe we shouldn't rely solely on our brains for decision-making.
You mean we should listen to our hearts?
Exactly. He says the heart can provide us with a deeper kind of wisdom, intuition.
I've definitely experienced that, like a gut feeling that tells me what to do.
That's exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And he says this intuition, it was highly valued in many ancient cultures.
Like the Cherokee concept of Chante Ishta, the single eye of the heart.
Exactly. They saw the heart as a source of deep knowing.
Fascinating. But is there any scientific evidence to support this idea of heart-based intuition?
There is. Braden talks about the research being done at the Institute of Heart Math.
The Institute of Heart Math, what are they finding?
They've found that when the heart and the brain are in a state of coherence, our intuition is heightened.
Coherence, meaning they're working in sync.
Right, and they've even developed techniques for intentionally creating this state of coherence.
So we can actually train ourselves to be more intuitive.
That's the idea. And he shares some real-world examples of people using their intuition to make important decisions.
Like what kind of decisions?
Well, he talks about a mother who had a premonition that her son, a helicopter pilot in Iraq, was in danger.
Oh, no.
And tragically, she was right. His helicopter was shot down.
So she had a gut feeling that something was wrong.
And he also shares a personal story about how he used his intuition to make a life or death decision.
Oh, tell me about it.
It was after the Luxor massacre in Egypt.
Yeah.
And he had to decide whether to go ahead with a planned tour group to the region.
Wow, that's a tough call.
It was. Everyone was telling him to cancel. But he had this strong, intuitive feeling that the trip would be safe.
Or was it?
It was. And it turned out to be a really profound experience.
So he trusted his heart over his head, and it paid off.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this wasn't just blind faith. It was based on tangible sensory impressions.
So how can we learn to access this heart wisdom?
He provides a 5-step technique in the book. It starts with focusing your attention on your heart.
Okay, focus on the heart. What's next?
Slow down your breathing. And then bring your awareness to any feelings you're experiencing in your heart area.
Okay, feeling the heart, and then?
Then silently ask your question from that heart-centered space.
So ask the question from the heart, not the head.
Right. And then just listen. Pay attention to any feelings or insights that arise.
That sounds simple but powerful.
It is. And he says that intuition is really the foundation for deeper levels of empathy and compassion.
So it's not just about making good decisions for ourselves, it's about connecting with others.
Exactly. And he draws on a conversation he had with a Tibetan abbot to illustrate this point.
The Tibetan abbot. That's interesting. What did they talk about?
They talked about the importance of compassion. The abbot said it's the fundamental force that connects us all.
I like that. We're all connected through compassion.
And in Mahayana Buddhism, compassion is seen as one of the two wings necessary for enlightenment, the other wing being wisdom.
So compassion and wisdom go hand in hand.
They do. And this leads Braden to discuss the topic of longevity. He contrasts two different approaches to life. One is the belief that we start dying the moment we're born.
Oh, that's a bit depressing.
It is. And it can lead to a lifestyle of excess and a shorter lifespan.
Right, like you're just trying to cram everything in before it's too late.
And the other approach is exemplified by a long-lived Tibetan nun who lived a life of purpose and community.
Okay, so two very different ways of looking at life and aging.
And then he talks about the science of longevity, specifically telomeres and the enzyme telomerase.
Telomeres, those are the protective caps on our chromosomes.
Yeah,
Okay?
and telomerase can actually repair and lengthen those telomeres.
So the longer your telomeres, the longer you live.
It's more complicated than that, but there's definitely a correlation.
Okay, so what can we do to keep our telomeres healthy?
Well, lifestyle factors play a huge role.
Like diet and exercise.
Exactly. And stress management is really important too.
Stress can shorten your telomeres.
It can. Chronic stress is really damaging.
Something else to worry about.
Right. And speaking of things to worry about, he touches on the often contradictory nature of health advice. Like, 1 minute eggs are bad for you, the next minute they're good.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen that. It can be really confusing.
It is. So he emphasizes the importance of critical thinking and a holistic approach to health.
So don't just follow the latest fad.
Exactly. And he goes on to talk about the role of stress in our lives. He distinguishes between constructive stress and destructive stress.
Constructive stress? Is there such a thing?
There is. It's the kind of stress that motivates us to solve problems and grow.
Okay, so not all stress is bad.
No. But chronic unresolved stress, that's the killer. Literally.
So we need to find healthy ways to manage our stress.
And he reminds us that many indigenous cultures have a different perspective on stress and well-being. They see themselves as part of a larger interconnected web of life.
A more holistic view.
Right. And they emphasize the importance of community and connection.
So we're not just isolated individuals struggling to survive.
No, we're all connected. And this brings him back to the Human Genome Project. Remember how scientists thought they would find over 100,000 unique human genes?
Right. They thought that's what made us special.
But they only found about 20,000, far fewer than expected.
So our genes don't tell the whole story.
They don't. And this challenged the idea that genes alone determine who we are.
Makes you wonder what else is going on.
And he talks about the Michelson-Morley experiment, which was originally interpreted as disproving the existence of a universal energy field.
An energy field, like a force that connects everything.
Yeah, like that. But later interpretations suggest that the experiment actually supports the idea of interconnectedness.
Oh, interesting. So the evidence can be interpreted in different ways.
And then he gets into the really mind-blowing stuff. He talks about the statistical improbability of DNA forming by random chance.
Okay, now we're getting into the big mysteries.
He says the odds are so astronomically small that it's essentially impossible.
So how did DNA come to be?
That's the question. And he suggests the possibility of directed mutation.
Directed mutation.
Yeah.
Like something intentionally guided the process.
That's the idea. And this is where he really pushes the boundaries of conventional science.
I can imagine. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with that idea.
Definitely not. But he's not afraid to explore those uncomfortable questions.
So he's proposing that there might be an intelligence behind our origins.
It's a possibility he's open to. And he talks about viewing the universe as a living system.
Like we're all part of one giant organism.
In a way, yes. And he quotes Dwayne Elgin, who says, this view emphasizes interconnectedness and interdependence.
It's a beautiful idea. We're all connected.
It is. And even Einstein, when asked about the meaning of life, he didn't give a purely scientific answer.
Oh, really? What did he say?
He said the meaning of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear for newer and richer experience.
Wow. That's pretty profound.
It is. And it speaks to this idea that there's more to life than just the material world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Can we try to sum up some of the key takeaways?
Absolutely. So first, Braden is challenging the traditional Darwinian narrative of evolution. He's not saying it's wrong, but he thinks it's incomplete.
Right. He's suggesting that there might be more to the story.
Exactly. And he points to evidence like the Neanderthal DNA findings, the anatomical stability of modern humans, and the concept of irreducible complexity.
Okay, so the evidence might be pointing towards a different origin story.
And second, he emphasizes the intelligence of the heart.
Not just the brain, but the heart too.
He provides evidence that the heart has its own neural network that allows it to process information, feel emotions, and even remember.
Right, and he talks about the importance of intuition and compassion.
And those things are connected to the heart.
So we need to listen to our hearts as well as our heads.
Exactly. And finally, he suggests that we need to reevaluate our place in the universe.
To see ourselves as part of something larger and more interconnected.
Exactly. And to recognize that we might be here for a reason.
A purpose.
Yes. And he believes that understanding these ideas can empower us to live more fulfilling lives.
Okay, I'm starting to see the big picture here. But what does this all mean for me personally?
Well, he encourages you to really examine your own beliefs about who you are and where you came from.
To question the stories I've been told.
Yes. And to be open to new possibilities.
To think outside the box.
And he provides practical tools for tapping into your heart's wisdom and cultivating compassion.
So I can actually use these ideas to improve my life.
Absolutely. And he reminds us that we have a choice in how we create our future.
A choice. So it's not all predetermined.
No, we have the power to shape our own destiny.
Wow, this has been a really eye-opening conversation.
It has, and we've only just scratched the surface of what Braden covers in his book.
So much to think about.
So, we encourage you to check out The Science of Self-Empowerment for yourself.
And see what resonates with you.
And ask yourself, what if the story of humanity is far grander and more mysterious than we've been led to believe? What if we possess abilities we've only dreamed of? And what if the future of our species depends on us embracing a new story, one that recognizes our interconnectedness, our potential, and our inherent worth?
That's a powerful thought to leave us with.
It is. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Until next time.
Bye, everyone.